Welcome to Sacrilegious Discourse.
For this is what the Sovereign Lord says.
Why do you need prophets to tell people who you are and what you want?
If you can justify everything that the God of the Bible has done, then you can justify any of your behavior.
A lot of this mentality is trickling into what is now mainstream right-wing Christianity.
I am capable of empathy greater than this God of the Bible.
This is a Bible that they tell kids. This is the good Lord. This is the good book. He is fantasizing about murder, mass murder.
Head over to sacrilegiousdiscourse.com right now to find out how to leave us a review or support us on Patreon.
Hey there, sinners and saints. It's your favorite Bible-bashing duo from Sacrilegious Discourse, and we need your help.
That's right, folks. We're raising funds for some heavenly equipment and a studio that doesn't sound like it's in the depths of hell.
Our current setup, let's just say it's more apocalypse than audiophile.
So if you want to hear us dissect the Bible without the background noise of demonic squirrels, chip in a few bucks.
We're aiming for $5,000 to upgrade our audio and build a studio worthy of blasphemous banter.
Donate today and help us spread the good word of atheism.
You can find a link right on our homepage, sacrilegiousdiscourse.com. Every dollar counts.
Even if it's from your collection plate. Husband!
Wife!
The fuck are we doing today?
Well, we are doing a special Patreon episode?
No, regular.
Regular episode. I apologize. I'm
it's
sorry.
A bonus.
But it's a special one. It's a special episode.
It's very special because I don't know what the fuck we're doing.
Well, I'm leading it today.
That's why I don't know what we're doing.
This is all my show.
Mm-hmm.
I prepped everything.
Yeah.
What the fuck's going on with the world?
You got tired of me doing it and decided you would do it. And I was like, fine, let's see how you do it then.
This could be a disaster. I don't know. We're going to find out. I did some stuff early on, and those always went poorly. But I feel like I've gotten better. Maybe. We're going to find out tonight. But tonight, we are going to be talking about apologist arguments, essentially. Mm-hmm. And, you know, just that's kind of the route we're going today. And we'll just kind of go into it from there. So are you ready to learn about apologist arguments?
I am ready to learn about apologist arguments, yes.
Okay. Well, let's do this.
Okie dokie.
Okay, so this is my show.
It is.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to do with it.
I'm in charge. I'm not sure how this is going to go, but I'm going to try my best to make this work.
Okay.
So, as I said in the intro, we're talking about apologist arguments.
Okay.
Okay, and so
what is an apologist? Can you tell me that?
Well, an apologist is someone who apologizes for the shit that's in the Bible, basically.
Okay.
I mean, they're there to make the inconsistencies consistent, right? So they take it and they're like, well, it says this here and that there, so this is why this works, and this is why you should believe in God, and this is why it all comes together.
So it's not that they're apologizing for it so much as that they're like, oh no, here's how it makes sense. It totally does.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain kind of thing. They're the announcer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm going to go through a lot of these these arguments quickly,
mm-hmm.
and then just kind of list them off, because some of them are baseless, essentially. So there's a bunch of different arguments that are in the apologist zeitgeist that they use to counter or to argue their case for God, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And probably if you're on like social media, the ones that I know of that do this stuff on a regular, like, well, everybody knows of that's in the online arena or even heard of this museum, know of like Ken Ham. And Ken Ham is the guy that makes the Ark encounter. He's got the Ark
Noah's
down there
Ark.
in Kentucky.
Noah's Ark thing.
Yeah. And he's a biblical literalist. So like he takes things literally happened this way. It's the Bible is a historical account, and that's how he kind of views things. But there's all kinds of different takes on what Bible apologists use as their reasons for God's existence. And, you know, another one I run into online, I know there's like a Frank Turek that I see oftentimes for apologist arguments, and then just your random everyday social media encounters where everybody and their brother seems to be a professional fucking Christian apologist. It's unreal how many people are out there arguing, and especially with the advent of artificial intelligence, people can just go right over and like, what's the best argument to argue for God over? And then they just come back and it's copy paste, and you're like, yeah, I'm arguing with a goddamn AI.
Right.
And this is insane.
Right.
Even if you're on Twitter, you've got the AI right there, and it doesn't strike them as ridiculous that they're using an artificial intelligence to argue that God is real.
You're using a mechanical God to defend your spiritual God.
That to me, right off the bat, is just like, do you not see what you're doing here? You know, like that makes no sense to me.
Right.
So anyway, I was going to list off the arguments. I'm going to save one to come back to because it's the one that really trips me up the most.
Okay.
So I'm going to come back to that one. And it's the first one I'm going to say here. So it's the cosmological argument, also known as the first cause argument. And it's basically saying that one says that everything that begins to exist has a cause. And since the universe began to exist, it must have a cause, i.e. God.
Oh,
so like, God exists because nothing else could have possibly caused that thing to start existing.
It's similar to the inability to grasp the idea of infinity.
Right.
Like our minds are not made for infinity, therefore God.
Now, look, on a base level, this one doesn't trip me up. Like I can rationalize it in my mind how this doesn't make sense. But when you get in the weeds with some of the apologists, they have some really technically good arguments to come back at you with if you don't know what the arguments are to begin with.
And see, this could easily be like a philosophical conversation, or like if you're having this conversation with somebody who even knows a little bit about like quantum physics.
Sure.
Like that could be a really fun debate even, but I wouldn't I would not want a bad faith actor on this.
Right.
Because then it's like, well, I don't know. You're arguing just to argue.
I don't know that they're not necessarily a bad faith arguer. I've run across people who are genuinely trying to make their point with this argument, and those are the ones that I struggle with. The ones that really know this argument, and we'll get into it. There's the Aquinas' 5 ways argument is what it kind of boils down to. I don't want to get into it too much right now because I'm going to come back to it. Okay. But there are some really fine points that they bring up that are, if you don't take the time to have the actual argument, they can really trip you up with it.
I mean, that's because they're talking philosophy.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're trying to pass off philosophy as fact, and that's not the way philosophy works.
Right. So no, definitely.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go on.
No. You're fine. The next one is another one that gets thrown out there quite a bit, and it's the teleological argument, the design argument. And it's basically says that the complexity, order, and fine tuning of the universe suggests that there's an intelligent designer. So so like the math that, like how I love math in nature, like how spirals and shells and flower petals and stuff, like there's a ratio. Right. They're saying that since it's mathematically perfect, that God had to have made it. Well, and it's the same one that's like, we exist in this realm of perfectness, right? Like the earth is this far from the sun and in this perfect orbit, and we're able to exist. And if that wouldn't, like, the only way that that's makes sense is if there's a God that made it make sense, right?
Sure.
And my off the cuff argument has always been, but we live in a universe of infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
So in an infinite possibility realm, it's definitely possible for the infinite to happen.
Right.
Like that just makes sense to me.
That one, I don't have a problem like knocking that one out of the water.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So, I mean, and you can go back and forth about this and, have that argument with them. But ultimately, to me, it's a very easy one to
dismiss.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not going to change their minds, but like, I don't struggle with that because I'm like, you think that math requires somebody to write the problem on the board. I recognize that math exists because math exists, and we're never going to convince each other. So walk away.
And if you get into the math of it, right? Like you can even go into like the multiverse type stuff where, other universes might exist, and again, none of this is where it can break down with apologists, because you can't, as a layman, with some regard, with some respect for science, right? Which is kind of where I put myself. I respect science. I can't have a an exact argument about every scientific concept on the planet.
But you have to when you're talking to these people. And that's what I mean by bad faith actor.
Yeah, well, because they're obviously sitting there using AI to try to, you know, and then they're expecting you to answer for those questions. But the truth of it is that if I can conceive of a way that this could happen without a God, then you're just arguing badly, because it's not, you're just trying to push your side of this. There is another side. You just don't want to look at that other side. Right. And that's really what that boils down to, in my opinion. One of the next ones is the moral argument. Okay. And this one I come across quite a bit as well. Okay. And basically it's saying that God is the ultimate giver of morals. And we cannot have morality unless there is a God.
Right. Because if I didn't have God protecting me, I would totally run over people all the time, and I would rape kittens and pull off the limbs off of babies and stuff like that.
Yeah, and this is where you'll get into people saying that, well, you know, like they'll say that you know God exists because I read that in the Bible. So we all know that God exists, and that's how we're able to have morals, even though we say we don't believe in God, because God has made his presence known. That's why we're able to be moral, even though we're atheists, because, you know, they have reasons for this shit. Okay. And it's ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, the ridiculousness of it is that socially, like as a species of humans that had to come up through thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? We had to learn to get together. We had to learn to work together as a group.
Scientifically, like biologically, socially. Yeah.
And it doesn't make a whole lot of... You can't move forward in the world if you're constantly murdering each other. Right. That doesn't... And yet we still do. It's called war. We do it all the fucking time. Right. So, I mean, even that morality has gray areas. Sure. But their point is that they think that you cannot have morality without a God. And I'm just like, that's just bullshit. Yeah. You're just spewing bullshit. Yeah. Because your Christianity represents what, 1/3 of the population of the world? So you're saying that essentially by your count, that 2/3 of the population of the world is immoral. Right. Right? And probably a lot of them actually believe that.
They do.
You know?
They do, 100%.
Then that's why, you know, we get accused of eating babies and everything else on the planet. That we're awful people, apparently.
You're either one extreme or the other.
Because we don't have God as our, you know, moral backdrop, I guess. Yep.
And there's no argument to that, honestly.
But, because they believe it, right? You can't argue someone's belief if they are not willing to entertain any other thoughts. Yeah. Right? And that's what most of these arguments come down to, is that people are not willing to entertain a different idea. Right. And I find that is, like, the people that are willing to entertain a different idea, oftentimes you can convince, like, I say this all the time. If I could sit down with you and we could agree on some things, it's a lot different than that conversation that you have on social media. Yeah. Social media allows you this distance between the person you're talking to.
So you can be a real shit and get away with it.
Yeah. And it's a terrible conversation. But I've had conversations with people in person where I've got them to admit certain things that allow them to maybe consider something different. And that's not going to change their mind right off the bat. Right. But some of those things sit on people for a while and they might go back to it. And those are the kind of things that I like to talk to people about and just make my little one-off, like, suggestions.
I mean, you know? I will say my best friend, when we first met like 12 years ago, she was Republican and Christian. Right. And she's not anymore, either of those things.
It's true.
And she credits me with introducing her to coming out of that. Sure. Like, I'm not the only thing, but I was the first person that she was in a close relationship with that, like, I can remember we were sitting in her car. She was dropping me off, and we had parked out back of where we were living, and she and I got into this really intense argument about racism and politics and just the social problems and economics and all of that, and how, being economically oppressed lends to racial suppression and all of that. And so we were just really it was a very intense debate.
Yeah.
And, you know, she had her talking points and I was countering them. And then she said something and I can't even remember, but I was like, you can't really believe that. But I said it and I was aghast and we both started crying. And because we were so frustrated, like we cared about each other so much, we were frustrated that we could not convey our point to the other and we couldn't make the other understand. But because we cared about each other, we kept having these conversations. Right. And, you know, and then she started working in public schools and in underprivileged areas. Sure. And she worked at a juvenile detention center. And, you know, she worked in all of these areas where she got to see firsthand the shit that I had been trying to explain to her. And so now she's actually way more progressive and liberal than I am. Yeah. Well, I mean... And I'm pretty fucking, you know, liberal and progressive.
Right. And that's exposure to things that you don't know about is definitely one way that people are often able to progress out of the ideas that they formerly held.
Exactly.
You know, and that's unfortunately not something that everybody gets to experience.
I know. And it's not to say because of where she ended up working, it's not to say she wouldn't have ended up there anyway. Right. But the discussions helped her get there. Yeah. And helped her embrace and understand what she was experiencing and to do something with it in her brain. Sure. And I wish more people had that kind of exposure. I don't think that I'm anything great. It could have been anybody, you know?
I guess, but the fact that you guys were such good friends,
right,
lent to the when she did encounter the things that she saw. Yeah, it gave your arguments credibility. Exactly, right? Which then maybe from there lent other arguments that you had made a little bit more credibility than they had before too. Exactly, you know, exactly, and that's what I'm saying. If you have conversations with people that you care about. And you say things that are just on the cusp of where they lie, and give them something credible if they ever experience something that lets them maybe accept that. Right. You've earned a credit. A credit. Yeah. So I mean that's definitely one way to get your ideas put forth on the people that you care about. Yeah.
I mean it's one of the reasons that we stay in relationship with my parents. Yeah.
I don't think it's always going to work either.
It's not. With my parents, it's not. With my best friend, it did, you know? Sure. But you do what you can.
Right. You do what you can. I think that's the simplest way to put that. So the next argument that gets made in my list here that I've got is the ontological argument. And that basically just says that if we can conceive of the fact that a God exists, then a God must exist.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, I can conceive of leprechauns. That doesn't make them real.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Your unicorns are real, babe.
Oh, my gosh.
They're real. You conceived of it, so they are real.
I love unicorns. Yeah. I also love endless cheese.
Yeah, you conceived of it, so therefore it exists.
That's the lamest argument I've ever heard. That's an actual argument?
That's an actual argument.
That makes me sad for humanity, honestly.
Now, look, when they're making the argument, they're going to make it sound a lot better than what I'm making it sound right now. But ultimately, it comes down to just what I said. If you can conceive of the fact that God exists, then a God must exist.
Ugh. That is a terrible argument.
It's a terrible argument.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's what I was saying. I'm not going to go into the weeds on every one of these. Right. And in fact, I really only have time to go into the weeds on one of them. Okay. So, I mean...
So you're telling me to shut up.
Touching base... Well, no. You're fine. You're fine. I'm touching base on all the arguments because I've talked to people that have had pretty much every one of these arguments online. And if you've been in the social media world of atheism or secularism, you've had these conversations with people probably. Or at least... witness the conversations.
Yeah, I was going to say, I do not engage in discussions of this sort because I don't have the patience for it. They would probably say, you don't have the convictions of your unfaith. And that's not it. I cannot, you know?
The part that kills me is I'll be having a conversation with some apologist online, right? They've got 100 followers or whatever. They're not really anybody important, as far as things go on social media, right? I'll be having this argument about, let's just say morality, right? And the basis for morality, and God's the basis for morality. And then at some point in the argument, I'll end up going over to their feed, their personal feed, scroll down, and I'll start seeing like Nazi shit. And I'm like, God. You've got to be fucking kidding me.
You're arguing
like,
morality with me and you're a fucking Nazi?
Yeah.
Really?
No, and then that's when I'm like, I can't. And like, that's just, you lose all hope of like any.
Like, oh, never mind.
Like, yeah, why am I even talking to this person?
Yeah.
Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, and it does that has actually happened to me. I'm like, I can't. You know? I
didn't realize I wouldn't have wasted my time. Right. It's like I have to ask you up front, am I going to find Nazi shit in before we engage?
Yeah.
Is there going to be Nazi shit in your feed?
Apparently a legitimate question to ask, I think. Yeah.
And that is weird. Like, that is so weird to me. Like, I don't recall growing up that being a thing that you legitimately had to ask people, you know, hey, before I waste my energy on you, you seem really cool, but like, if I come over to your house, am I going to find Nazi paraphernalia?
Yeah, I didn't know Nazi behavior, Nazi whatever. I didn't know it was equivalent to bell bottoms. You know?
Right?
Like, I didn't know it was going to be making a comeback.
Like, so. it's almost as prevalent as the fucking Confederate flag, which...
Yeah.
You know, like, that is not shocking. And if you go over to people's houses and you're like, oh, they've got a Confederate flag up in their living room. Okay, I probably won't be going back over there, I guess.
Right.
You know, and that has happened, you know, where you go over and you see something like that. But you don't go over to somebody's house and see Nazi shit. But now you might. And that feels weird to me. Like, what?
Yeah. No, it's definitely weird.
It's a question you got to ask, and who knew?
Unfortunately, yes. Yeah. So the next one is the historical arguments for Jesus' resurrection.
Okay.
So
I'm like drawing a blank here. What the fuck is that?
Well, there's, the 4 accounts of Jesus' resurrection.
Oh, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yeah.
Said.
Do you know anything about those accounts?
They said it happened.
They did say it. I mean, well,
that's all I know.
I think at least most of them did. There might have been, I think one of them actually. So, like, we're not completely versed on this yet because we haven't actually reached the New Testament. But I did actually read a book by Bart Ehrman, and it was called Misquoting Jesus. And I know for a fact that there are major discrepancies between the accounts of Jesus' resurrection. And I believe, this may be me being slightly wrong, but I believe that one of the accounts doesn't even mention his resurrection.
Really?
I believe so. I could be wrong about that. But there are major discrepancies between all the accounts. When we get to the New Testament, we're going to find that there are major discrepancies between.
Now, okay, but some people would say that is actually more proof that it did happen than that it didn't, because investigators, like, when they question witnesses, and they, separate them so that they can get the facts. If they tell the exact same story down to the detail, then that's proof that they collaborated. They got together beforehand and collaborated and made the story up together.
Yeah.
Whereas if there are discrepancies that don't really matter much, like the dress was yellow, the dress was orange, whatever.
But it's not like minor discrepancies though. There's some major differences, and part of the problem is that the stories were written at least 80 years past when this actually supposedly happened. So none of these were actually written by whoever these original people were supposed to have been.
Okay.
Right. These are written after the fact, and I think even one of them was written hundreds of years after the fact. So none of them match up exactly. Cool. And actually, there's quite a few major discrepancies.
Okay.
And it's problematic. Okay. So, but the historicity of the Bible and of Jesus is one of those major arguments that people have, and some of it is the they'll bring up the historical accounts of the battles that happen in the Old Testament and things like that as part of their reasoning for believing in the Bible as well.
So the Bible is proof of the Bible's truth. is what I'm getting out of that.
Well, in that, yes, and I'm actually blending two arguments. Part of it is the argument of the Bible's reliability. So, like, I'm kind of blending these two arguments together.
They do kind of go together, though.
Right. Because they're saying that if this battle happened, then obviously the Bible's correct.
Right.
But that's not how things work, though.
No, it's not, because there are a lot of Superman comics that mention New York, but they also mention other cities that don't exist, like Metropolis.
Right.
So, just because it said New York exists doesn't mean that Metropolis happened.
Or Superman happened.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, that's what, again, a lot of these arguments are very easily dismissed, in my opinion, especially if you're not indoctrinated into the belief, right?
Right.
Like, we aren't indoctrinated into the belief that the Bible is correct and right.
Right.
But many people are. Mm-hmm. And so they're arguing from a stance of they believe this is all correct and right. Mm-hmm. And therefore, if they believe that, then God must be correct and right as well, because their Bible is correct and right.
I wish that they wouldn't worry about defending their perspective, because it's fine if you believe that. That's what faith is. Faith is a belief in something, not in trying to prove that it is true.
Right.
Like that. It's like you're trying to undo the magic of your belief by trying to prove to me so hard that it exists. And that's silly.
No, I mean, if you're going to take if I were to believe in God, right, I think the thing that I would do would be to believe in the idea that all these people believe very strongly in a God, right? Mm-hmm. And not worry about the facts. Like, the facts don't match up. The facts are problematic.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have faith in your God, then just call it what it is. Faith.
Exactly.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's all it's ever going to be, because you don't have proof. You don't have proof.
Because that's not what faith is.
But if you want to have faith, then just have it.
Just have faith.
But don't expect other people to have it for any other reasons.
And don't change the laws around the country to fucking reflect your faith.
Yeah.
Your magic.
Yeah. This one kind of goes along with the same thing we were just talking about, but it's the argument from prophecy. Okay. So, like, this is saying that because the prophecies came true, that God must be real. And we've kind of been going over some of this in our podcast recently, too.
Yeah.
So,
except the when it was written and when it was edited is not the same as when the dude was walking the planet.
Yeah. Well, and you also know that I can't remember which book of the accounts it is, but they kind of slam all the prophecies into one book, and they're like, look, all these things came true, and it was the one that was written way after the fact.
Yeah.
So, like, they made all these things come true on purpose.
Yeah.
And then people are like, look, they came true, and it's like, wait, no, some fucking writer back in the early days of human history decided that we want to make these things come true, and they did. Right. And now you believe it thousands of years later, and I can't quite wrap my brain around that idea.
Yeah.
And why you think that that's okay, but that's what's happening, apparently. Oh. And that's where we're at. And as a society, we take the word of someone 2,000 years ago over the facts in front of our face today.
That's so frustrating.
It really is. It really is. This is why I struggle when I have people arguing with me online. I struggle to stay nice.
Yeah.
I do manage to do it most of the time, unless they get really shitty with me. But I struggle.
I don't have patience for it, and that's why I don't engage.
I don't usually get shitty until they get shitty, and then I've learned. I wasn't as good at this at first, but I've learned to back away at that point.
I'm glad, because you would get worked up, and then I would have to hear about it for the next 3 days about fucking random asshole Christian guy arguing with you.
But I am going to say this. I've also made a lot of friends online who are Christian who are willing to talk.
Okay.
That's fair. And they're generally Christians who are more left-leaning, but they're willing to talk, and they're willing to admit that maybe everything that they believe is not 100% correct. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I love that idea. I love the idea that we can I can bounce an idea off someone and they will bounce another idea off me, and we can have a respectful conversation about our differing ideas.
Right. Like, hey, you're a Christian and you've read the Bible. What's your take on this? And then for them to be able to say, actually, I have no fucking idea. That's kind of bonkers, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, that's the coolest.
Yeah, no, I crave that, actually. I want someone to actually have
be honest.
An honest conversation with me.
Yeah.
You know, like that is something I long to have with people, because it's so rare today. Like, it's so rare to find someone willing to challenge their own ideas and willing to sit down with you and listen to new ideas, and vice versa.
Gosh. That reminds me, this is so off topic, but that's what we do. We saw what I'm going to say is the most perfect, awesome episode of any Star Trek ever today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it was a Voyager episode, and it's basically 700 years in the future, and this civilization has an imperfect understanding of their own history and how Voyager was involved in it.
Yeah.
And one of the archaeologist scientist guys is able to reconstruct the hologram of the Doctor.
Well, they found the program.
Yeah.
Like the backup program.
The backup program, yeah. And so when, they bring the Doctor online, the Doctor tells them what actually happened because, he was there.
Right.
And this dude has to fucking re-examine everything he thought he knew.
Right.
And at first he's like, fuck you, no, and turns him off. And then, turns him back on. And that was such an amazing moment.
Right.
Because it was the humbleness to be like, what you're saying doesn't match what I know. And as a matter of fact, it makes what I know stupid and wrong and bad. And it makes me feel yucky.
And I thought the more important thing of that whole conversation was so the Doctor actually was like, I just want you to shut me off. I don't want to be responsible for all the violence and things that are going to be happening because of because of the new ideas that I'm presenting to your world.
Yeah.
Right. And the Doctor was like, just turn me off. I don't want to be responsible for this. But then the guy that was re-examining his own beliefs said, no, we need to live with this now. We need to examine this as a society. We need to sit in this and learn from this.
Yeah.
And that's the only, if it doesn't happen now, it's going to take another 700 years to resolve our differences.
Yeah.
And then they kind of pan forward another 700 years and use that moment to say that this is when things started changing for their society to make them more unified.
It was meta within meta. Yeah. And I had goosebumps going up and down my whole body.
Yeah.
Because it was just so perfect for the moment that we're in right now, and so perfect actually with what we're talking about, just the humbleness of being able to say everything I knew was wrong, and I'm not necessarily okay with admitting that, but it's important to me to know the truth, even if the truth is hard.
Yeah, and if anybody's wanting to look up the episode, I can't remember the exact name of this episode, but it was in season 4 of Voyager.
It's right before Demon.
Yeah, it's right before, there's something like that. But it's right in the...
Because the one that we just watched was Demon, and then that history one was right before it.
Got it, yeah.
So
that's the one we're talking about there.
It's the most perfect Star Trek episode of any of the shows ever.
Right.
Honestly, thus far.
Yeah, but more than the Picard one where he lives a whole life?
Yeah. On Next
think
Generation.
So? Really?
Yeah. I feel like...
I don't know, that one was pretty strong.
No, that one was strong, and that was a good episode. Don't get me wrong. It's still in my, top 5. It's in everybody's top 5.
Right.
But to me, the historical importance...
Sure.
Politically and socially...
No, that's fair. Because it is very relevant.
It matters.
Yeah.
That one, the one that I'm talking about matters. The other one was rich and deep and, in a... literature sense.
Sure.
Was a wonderful story and a tragedy and just beauty in the tragedy. And sure, I'm not saying that episode was bad by any means at all.
Yeah.
It's still top 5.
Right.
Perfect episode.
Right.
But the Doctor, Oh, God.
It was a good episode.
It was so good. Okay, sorry, but
No, you're good.
it is
You're good.
relevant, though. Like, being able to have an honest discussion even when it's hard.
Yeah.
And even when it means that everything you knew was wrong.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
All right, go ahead with your reasoning. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. The next one on the list, this one is a popular one that most people, if you've followed any apologetic arguments, is aware of. It's called Pascal's wager.
I've heard of it, but I always forget what it means.
Yeah, so this is basically, it's safer to believe in God than to not believe in God.
Oh, so if you have to pick one, you might as well err
Yeah.
on the side of caution.
Yeah, what would you say your reasoning for not using that as a reason to believe in God would be? I'm just curious, like, what's your off-the-cuff reaction
Off the cuff?
to that? Yeah.
Because I can't just choose. Like, I don't have a choose button that says, okay, well, if I'm going to err on the side of caution, I guess I'm just going to go ahead and decide to believe in God. Like, that doesn't work for me. I don't have that ability.
But you might also ask, which God?
Yeah, there is that as well. There is that.
Or even which version of the God that you're talking about.
God. Yeah.
Right?
Which Bible-y God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, there's so many different choices for a God if we're just talking about a God, right?
Like, if you're going to err on the side of caution, that means that you're just picking one willy-nilly and you're just going along with.
Yeah. The problem is that most people that are talking to you about the Pascal's wager version is that they're coming from a perspective where they're assuming that there is only one God because they're talking about their God.
Sure.
Right? They don't understand. They can't even see outside of their own reasoning that there are any other gods.
They don't even know that, like, the person that sits next to them at church, if they even go to church, has an entirely different interpretation.
Right.
Than the pastor in front of them even.
But I think more importantly than that, why would it even be, like, if you chose that method to believe in a God, wouldn't your God be able to see through your bullshit?
And that's another thing. That, like, I don't think it works like that, bro.
Yeah.
Like, that, and that's, I guess, what I mean. Like, I could tell you, yeah, I 100%, okay, sure, I believe in God. There, now will you get off my back? Like, I could say those words, but any God that's, goddish, godly, godlike,
right,
God-tastic is gonna know that I'm lying.
Yeah.
And,
no, absolutely.
And I don't think that you get points for trying to go along to get along.
Right.
Like, I don't know, maybe you do. Like, I don't know, God seems weird. God's a dick, Maybe if there is a God, maybe, like, you do get points for just like, well, I'm just going to go through the motions.
Sure. I guess, maybe.
But that seems stupid.
It really depends on the God. But, like, the chances of you being right are so much more slim than you being right if you just choose no God.
Yeah.
That, like, it doesn't make any sense.
But to me, it's not even a choice. Like, I'm not choosing not to believe any more than I would be able to choose to believe in a God.
Sure.
I've never had that.
But you got to understand, too, a lot of people are coming out, like, a lot of atheists even are coming out of a position where they are leaving their God behind. That God. Yes. Right?
Yes, I do understand
this argument is a valid one to have for some people because much of the world that they live in is seen through the lens of that God, even as an atheist.
See, and I can recognize that is an experience that some people have. I can respect that it exists.
Right.
I just don't have any understanding of it.
Right.
And so when somebody tries to present that as a reason for me, it doesn't work.
Right. It doesn't make any sense at all. Because it doesn't, you're immediately put off by, like, what?
If I could flip the switch on, don't you think I would have? That would have made my life so much easier.
Right.
Like, I don't want to be in this weird relationship with my parents where I'm an atheist and they're hardcore Christians.
Right.
Like,
yeah, it would be much easier to be Christian in this world.
Yeah, especially right now.
In our world.
Yes.
Right? It would be much easier.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not.
Yeah.
And we can't because that's fake. That would be fake.
Yeah.
And we don't do fake very well.
No. No, I barely do straight up very well, Like, I can't even. Ugh.
Right. So the last one I'm going to mention here, as far as arguments go, is called the argument from consciousness. So basically, it's the argument that says that if we have rational thought and we have consciousness, the only way that can be, explained is through a God. The same thing, kind of the same idea as the morality thing. Like if we have the ability to have rational thought, there must be a higher being that's responsible for that higher reasoning that we have in our brains, right? We can't possibly just have this for no fucking reason.
Really?
There's got to be a good reason for it, and that reason's got to be a God.
The dolphins disagree.
The dolphins probably, yeah. I mean, but maybe God, did for the dolphins too. So we just don't know. But obviously there's lots of physical processes in the brain. And we can attribute a lot of those physical processes to, actual, like when you are feeling fear, you can see where it lights up in your brain. When you're feeling love, you see where it lights up in the brain.
Yeah, like you're talking about scientifically, like if you're hooked up to a machine where they're looking at your brain.
So much like you have a reaction when you catch a ball, right? Your brain has a reaction when it has a feeling. And it's chemically able to be seen. And you can see it react to these things. Right? So it doesn't make sense to me that would be a God, because these are things that were
they're science, they're hormones, they're cellular,
and it's evolution. Like we've learned these responses and we respond to things in ways that help us through life because of evolutionary behavior that gets us further along. Like love, like that gets us to propagate as a species, right? Fear gets us to run away from things that are dangerous. Like these are things that help us as a species generally. So evolutionary, like with evolution, we can explain a lot of these things away. But even beyond that, like we have artificial intelligence now. So rational thought isn't even exactly tied to a brain. Right. Like not in so far as or a physical body or anything. Not
AI as we know it, like ChatGPT. You're talking about like legit AI.
Yeah, like the high end, whatever.
High end stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So I mean, there's all these reasons why that's not a good argument as well. Now, I'm sure there might be another argument out there that I missed, but that's the gist of most of the big arguments that are available for apologists.
I didn't even know that there was a list of apologists. Like,
I just went out and tried to find a list of this is what I came up with as far as, and a lot of them are similar ideas that just overlap. Kind of rebranded into different subcategories, sort of. There's the bigger ones are the ones that were listed towards the top mostly. Those are and Pascal's wager is another big one. So, but like the cosmological, the teleological, the
I didn't know that there were like apologist arguments that have titles that are common things that you're going to run into these. Right. Like I didn't even know. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So I said in the beginning, I wanted to cover a little bit more about the cosmological argument. And this is actually going to touch on the teleological argument as well. But it's an argument I've run into more than a few times online. Okay. And this is one that does trip me up a little bit when I'm having these conversations, because people tend to have this they step you through I swear there has to be like a fucking like walk your argument this way, make sure that they hit all these points before you say these words. Because every time you talk to somebody about this, they've got a specific way that they want you to answer every question before they'll move on to the next section of it. Right. So they're setting you up. Yeah. They're setting you up.
And they're giving you rope and letting you hang yourself.
Right. Yeah. So if you're having an argument with someone online and they're asking you to answer it in a specific way, and they won't move on to the next step until you answer it in a specific way, this is probably the argument that they're having with you. Okay.
Good to know.
Yeah. And it's based on Thomas Aquinas's 5 ways argument is kind of how it's known. And Thomas Aquinas is from like the 1300s. And a lot of these arguments are based on things from, Aristotle and different people that were in the past. Like he took a lot of ideas and turned it into this. Yeah. So it's philosophy. Right. So the cosmological argument, also known as the first cause argument, says that everything in motion is set in motion by something else. There must be a first mover that is not moved by anything else, and they say that this is God. Well, my first reaction to that is, why does God get a special pass?
Right.
If God is the first mover,
Then
who put him into
moved
fucking
God?
motion,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's always my first question.
Right.
And they won't let me answer it that way.
Right.
Right. Like, in order for them to have the conversation they want to have, you have to accept that there's a first mover, whether it's God or something else. It's
Right.
like, there was a first mover. But I'm like, but that's not even the case either, because science is starting to see that maybe there is no first mover position. Like,
Right.
maybe this was a permanent state of the universe. Like,
Oh my
like,
gosh.
there's all kinds of different ideas out there.
Can I go off topic for a second?
Yeah.
Because this relates to an argument that I have had with a literature and grammar person online, where I said that there is no true second person POV.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So first POV is point of view. Okay.
Sure.
So first person point of view is I, me, I did this, me, right? It's from my perspective.
Right.
Okay. You is from your perspective, your car, you went, you ran, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then third person is they did this over there, they, them. They were doing some shit.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my argument is that there is no true second person, because if I am writing a book, and I like, one of the most popular examples of this is the book You, right?
Okay.
The narrator is a guy, which is first person, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But he's saying, I saw you today. You went to the store. You did this. You did that. You were doing this. So he's like narrating somebody else's actions, but
Right.
it's still framed from a first person perspective.
Sure.
And that's the only way to tell a second person perspective is from a first person. So that like argument there,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like that is so,
Yeah.
Okay. That hit me.
No. Yeah.
It's very similar, right?
Right. So I'm going to list off the actual, the 5 ways. Okay. And I kind of touched on the first one already. The argument from motion. Everything in motion is set in motion by something else. There must be a first mover that is not moved by anything else, and that's God. Okay. The second part of that is the argument from causation. First cause argument. Everything that exists has a cause. If you trace all causes back, there must be an uncaused first cause, and that is God, according to this argument.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Third part, the argument from contingency. This is the necessary being argument. Things exist that could have failed to exist. They are contingent. If everything were contingent, there would be a time when nothing existed. Therefore, there must be a necessary being, i.e. God.
What? I didn't even follow that.
It gets really complicated, honestly.
Okay.
So it's really hard to follow. And like, I have to ask a lot of follow-up questions when I'm having this argument, honestly. But in their mind, they've worked this out to make perfect sense. Okay. So number 4 is the argument from degrees of perfection. We recognize varying degrees of goodness, truth, and nobility. These must be judged against a perfect standard, God. Okay. Yeah. So you can't judge perfection unless you have a perfect standard. First mover.
Oh, there's
God.
no ideal. Okay.
Right. And then the teleological argument aspect of this is the argument from design. The order and purpose and nature suggests a designer, and that is God.
Okay.
So those are the 5. Those are the 5 ways.
Okay.
Right. And ultimately, when you get right down to it, there is so many rebuttals to each one of these steps, whether it be in science or just common sense.
Yeah.
But the way you get stepped through this argument is so ridiculous, and they have such a methodical way of doing it as to make you just crazy in the whole aspect of just even arguing this with them.
Right.
There's not a single argument I've ever heard from any apologist ever that I can't rationally come up with an idea as to why it doesn't work. And ultimately is like, all you have to ask yourself in any one of these arguments is, what if God doesn't exist? Can you still have that argument? Is that argument still a valid argument? Like, let's just assume, like, they start from the assumption that a God exists.
Right.
I'm starting from the assumption that God doesn't exist.
Right.
Right. And so it doesn't always work. And even if it does work, it doesn't work with your God necessarily.
Right.
Right? I'm fine with having a philosophical debate about whether or not there was a first cause to the universe.
Philosophically,
right?
which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Sure.
That's what you're asking.
Right.
But you want to say always one way. And it's like, oh, hold on. I wanted to have a philosophical debate.
Well, yeah, they want to say that it's always the Christian God is what they want to say.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, why does it have to be you're having this philosophical debate with me, but why does it have to be the Christian God?
Right. Like, you've already skipped 10 steps ahead. Like, you're trying to convince me that any God exists, but now you have the specific dude in mind?
Right.
Hold on.
Right.
Hold on.
Well, and I encourage. I'm not going to go through the whole argument with the Aquinas' 5 ways thing, but I encourage anybody who has had arguments with people online to look this up and then look up the counter arguments to it, because it's an interesting debate. It is philosophically, it's an interesting debate. The problem that most people get hung up on is which God they're promoting when they're saying this argument.
Right.
But it is an interesting debate nonetheless.
So it could be fun to have with somebody who's not an asshole, or another atheist, or an agnostic.
Sure.
Or like a Wiccan.
I still think it's flawed.
Yeah.
But that being said, because here's the problem with it. Philosophical debates are fun and great and whatever. But ultimately, we have a lack of knowledge to even have the debate in the first place.
Well, a philosophical debate does not require that you reach a resolution.
Right.
And a religious debate does. And that's the difference.
Yeah. Well, and that's the problem, right? They use these philosophical debates as quote unquote proof that their God exists. It's not proof. It's a philosophical argument. And a philosophical argument has no... It's not using a philosophical argument does not use your God. It uses a being, an idea,
right?
Of what, like, first mover could be the Big Bang,
right?
First mover could be any number of things,
right? That
doesn't require there to be even a God.
Dark matter, I don't know.
And that's the problem. That's the problematic side of apologists,
right?
Is that they always start with the idea that the answer to their question is God.
And not just God, but Yahweh of the Bible as they believe in
depending
him.
on who you might be arguing with someone from that's a Muslim, right?
Okay.
So, it could work in any number of different religions, but ultimately you're arguing with them saying that it's their God.
But you know who has never reached out to me and tried to convince me? A Muslim or a Jew. You know who only ever has tried to convince me and reached out and bothered me and knocked on my door and got all up in my face online or changed the laws of the country? Christians.
Well, and that's because of where we are in the world. And to be fair, I have had people who are Muslim reach out and try to convince me that,
only
Allah
because,
is real.
Right, but only because you have put yourself out there as a figure in the atheist and therefore religious world.
Right.
Nobody has just, like, before you came out, quote unquote, as an atheist, nobody just walked up to you and said, hey, you should be Muslim, though.
No, and that's fair. That's fair.
But
it's not something you encounter a lot.
People have come up to you and said, you should totally be Christian. You're not saved. You're going to hell.
That is true. So, in real life, that has happened to me.
Yes.
And
me
just
as well.
Randomly in the world, even not even from just people that I know.
No,
like,
you could just be sitting.
People.
You could be sitting in the fucking waiting room at the doctor, and the lady next to you is reading a magazine, and she starts a little conversation with you, like, "Oh, these are cute, aren't they?" And you're like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, those are cute." And then in your head, you're like, "Oh, I guess we're talking. Okay, I'll be social today."
Yeah.
And then she's like, "Are you saved, honey?" And you're like, "What the fuck? Where did that come from?"
Yeah, no, it's a problem.
It's out of the blue. Or, like, I've been at somebody else's house and, they had a friend of a friend over.
Yeah.
And somebody else, will just start, like, passing out, I don't know, like a glass of wine to everybody. And then when they get to me, they're like, do you have a personal relationship with Christ? Like, literally, I have been asked these questions unexpectedly, just out of the blue.
Right.
It's so weird when it happens because I'm like, that feels so invasive and private and like I did not sign up for this discussion.
Who the fuck are you to ask me that question in the first place?
Right?
Yeah.
Like, do you? Tell me all about it, please. I can't wait.
Well, and one of the things that I take issue with is people are, especially online, they're always like, why do you care so much about what this God that you don't believe in is doing? And I'm like, it's not that I care. I don't believe in your God.
Yeah.
I care about what you and other people are doing in the name of this God.
I care that people randomly walk up to me and think it's okay to ask me my position on their God. That's weird.
Right.
And they aren't doing it in a friendly way. They're doing it in a I'm really worried about your soul because you know you are going to hell, right? Like, what the fuck? Get off of me.
Yeah.
I was fine till you just walked up to me and randomly put your religion all over me.
So I just wanted to cover this just because I feel like, not that the arguments themselves are important, but I wanted to put this out there because a lot of theists out there have these guidebooks. They're on one of these arguments that I have mentioned tonight. You can pretty much categorize every theological argument online into one of these categories. And because of that, it's somebody, they're researching these arguments through a book they've read, through somebody else that's promoting these ideas. Something has prompted them to learn this specific argument and take it to the nth degree.
Right. You know? How to make this argument work hard.
Right. And I guess this episode is more about just
be aware.
It's whatever those what were those Saturday specials where they
the PSAs.
The PSA, public service. This public service announcement for everybody. Just be aware that when someone is arguing with you about a specific argument for God,
and it feels forced,
they have a guidebook.
Yeah,
they have a preconceived way of arguing that point that has been done over and over and over and over again. It's the same fucking arguments time and time and time again. And they can't win it. All they can do is argue against people who don't know the answer to what they're asking.
Right.
Or are not confident enough in their ideas of their own atheism or their own secularism to defend their own ideas with regard to those arguments.
And they shouldn't have to.
They shouldn't have to, but
right.
Some people are going to put you on the spot, even just out in the world.
I know they do. They do. It's so weird. This is why I don't socialize.
So it's worth knowing that these are just pills that people are swallowing. These ideas, these arguments. So, but that's really all I had for this episode. Did you have anything to add?
I think you did a really good job leading this discussion. I had no idea what to expect, and you came well prepared. You did a better job than I do.
Well, thank you.
Maybe I should make you take over.
All right. Well, that's all we have for today. And we'll be back tomorrow. We should be starting a new book of the Bible.
Habakkuk-a-choo.
That's what wife's going with on this one.
Yep.
It's Habakkuk. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we will see you guys then.
Bye.
Hey, wife. I guess that's the end?
But husband, that's just sad.
It doesn't have to be. We are on lots of social media platforms like Twitter. Our handle there is sacrilegious_D.
For D's nuts.
Oh my God. Stop doing that. Anyway, we're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. There's a link to all of our social media sites at our website.
Ooh, we have a website?
Yeah, it's sacrilegiousdiscourse.com, where you can also find a link to our merch shop.
We have a merch shop?
Yep, we have podcast-themed clothing, mugs, notebooks, and more, as well as an atheist and science-themed products.
Wow, our fans should really go check that out right now.
Definitely. They can get in touch with us by sending an email to sacrilegiousdiscourse@gmail.com. But before they do that, we could really use some help.
Oh yeah? With what?
Well, it's not free running the podcast, and we need some financial support in order to get better equipment, which will free up time so we can concentrate on our podcast and our fans.
Okay, so what should they do?
Head over to patreon.com/sacrilegious discourse and sign up as a contributor on our podcast. Supporters there receive additional bi-weekly episodes that we record just for our Patreon members for as little as $2 a month.
Also, we'd really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe on whatever platform you're using.
And Apple Podcast reviews help us out tremendously.
Like and subscribe, leave an Apple review, join us on Twitter, support us on Patreon. That's a lot of instructions. Don't forget to say thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.